Good morning. Come join me as I read again this book, Mother of Peace, and God Shall Wipe Away All Tears from Their Eyes, a memoir by Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. And for those of you who doesn't know her, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon leads an interreligious and international movement for peace. Since her war-torn childhood, she has yearned to realize God's dream of peace. Her path led to her holy wedding with Reverend Sun Myung Moon and an unimaginable life of sacrifice, perseverance, and devotion to God and humankind. Her story is a noble and touching drama of a village girl called to serve God's purpose as the mother of peace. In her own word, she said, "My lifelong goal and determination is to fulfill the dream of God, our Heavenly Parent, longs to live together with all of us as generation of good and loving people, forming the Heavenly Parent's holy community, one family under God. I'm determined to bring that dream into reality during my remaining years, and I invite all of my readers to join me in this historic task." Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. And I will start on chapter, The Emblem of the Kingdom of Heaven, on page 171. I'll start on this chapter. Science is a stepping stone. Once in a while, you hear religious people devalue science as having nothing to do with God, and secular people devalue religion as having no practical use. Both sides separate God and science. Both are in error. God wants us to develop science and technology as tools with which we can exercise the dominion of love over all things. And that is God's great blessing. We must love nature with the same heart as God and cultivate it for the benefit of humanity. This is God-centered science and technology. In 1972, my husband and I convened the first international conference on the unity of the sciences, or ICUS. As with any new project, we endured many obstacles and birth pangs to bring it into the world. And then after ICUS was launched, many scholars accuse us of using scientists to legitimate ourselves. In many cases, the development of ICUS went like this. A scholar would be approached with a personal invitation saying, "Professor, I sincerely invite you to attend this upcoming science conference." He or she would send a response that said, "I have heard that the founders of this forum are Reverend Dr. Sun Myung Moon and his wife, and I am opposed to them." Several years later, this same scholar would accept our invitation and present his or her work at the conference. This was because he or she had realized the true motivation of ICUS. As the years passed, we received enthusiastic responses from distinguished scholars worldwide who were wary at first, then participated and became loyal supporters. This was because through ICUS, they discovered a larger purpose for their work. We always considered ICUS themes with care. The first ICUS, which convened in New York City, was on the topic, "The Moral Orientation of the Sciences." My husband and I, as the founders, wanted to raise the question of what science could do for the sake of humanity. The purpose and goal of science are to realize humanity's dream. My husband said in his opening address, "Scientific civilization, by its very nature, must be shared by humankind as a whole." We convened the second ICUS in Tokyo in 1973 under the theme, "Contemporary Science and Ethical Values." Thanks to the participation of 5 Nobel Prize laureates, the conference attracted much attention. While the first conference assembled just 20 scientists from 7 nations, The second ICUS drew 60 participants from 18 nations in just 1 year. It had become a global forum. Father Moon gives the founder's address at an early ICUS. By 1981, when we held the 10th ICUS in Seoul with 808 scholars attending from approximately 100 nations, ICUS had become the leading global forum of its kind. During that event, we proposed the free and generous exchange of technology among nations, something that had never been imagined in history. Our view is that because science and technology are revealed and given by God, they are the commonwealth of all humanity. We emphasize that no country should monopolize these common assets. My husband and I sponsor the ICOS forums to promote the free exchange of science and technology. Our intention especially was to see science and technology shared with the developing countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Put another way, we want to develop countries to globalize the cutting-edge standard of science and technology by sharing their tools and methods with developing nations. To set an example, when we saw food shortages in some parts of Africa, we donated machinery for a German missionary to build a sausage factory in Zambia. We arranged for education in advanced method of crop cultivation and livestock breeding. In South America, we raised cattle. Also, we planted trees and took other measures to keep nature green and pristine. In Kona, on Hawaii's Big Island, we started a coffee plantation. Harvesting coffee beans is strenuous work, and cultivating the plant requires great skills. Initially, we suffered serious losses because we did not spray pesticides, which damaged human health. In time, we found a way to repel insects without using harmful chemicals, and now we're producing premium coffee that is pesticide-free. We purchased automobile assembly lines in Germany and established automobile factories in China and North Korea. When we saw farmers doing the back-breaking work of sowing rice by hand, we acquired an agricultural machinery factory and supplied them with the equipment they lack. Looking upward into the sky, we established Korea Times Aviation to support state-of-the-art aviation technology and space engineering. These efforts and more naturally go through ups and downs, but our vision is unchanging. We learn as we go, and our investment will continue. February 23, 2018, the 24th ICOS in Seoul, following his hiatus since the year 2000. ICOS was relaunched with the 23rd ICOS in 2017. For years, the ICOS forums led to countless scientific collaborations and new friendship. For years, the ICOS forums led to countless scientific collaboration and new friendship. In 2000, we entered a new phase of the Providence and put ICOS on hold. I renewed the annual International Conference on the Unity of Sciences in 2017. The 24th ICOS, held in 2018, gathered hundreds of participants devoted to pioneering new paradigm for scientific research. In my opening remarks to that conference, I cast the vision to solve the many problems facing the world, whether they are religious or scientific. First, we must know correctly about God, who is the origin of the universe, and about true parents. Then you will be able to find the solutions. ICOS is gathering scientists, engineers, and inventors to harmonize the technologies and tools in our hands with the ecology of the natural world, as well as original human nature created by God, and for the purpose of realizing authentic human happiness and lasting peace. Chapter 6, Creating the Road to One World, on page 177. One street, one global neighborhood. On the southern Japanese island of Kyushu, there is a small port named Karatsu. This city on the shores of the Korea Strait is famous for the pottery that bears its name. Karatsu pottery was originally created by Korean potters. During the 1980s, key members visited the city several times on our behalf to develop an international project. Karatsu was the launching site for an initiative that my husband had announced at our international conference on the unity of sciences in the autumn of 1981, the construction of an international peace highway circumscribing the globe. The vision is for a high-speed transportation artery linking the entire globe. On the day of its completion, much of our world will become one village, linked by one road. The process of constructing the highway itself provides the world's peoples and governments a common purpose, a transnational lines of commerce and recreation that open up will stimulate inter-ethnic exchange of culture and goods and draw us to live in harmony as neighbors. That highway could pass through a tunnel connecting Korea's Busan with Karatsu, and there, in 1986, we commenced a pilot tunnel construction. I had been interested in visiting the site. Finally, in 2016, I had the opportunity to go and see it. During my visit, I renewed our movement's commitment to the Peace Highway. I believe that the world's people are ready for this and that the time is ripe for launching the project based upon global plan. To tell this story to the world, from the streets to the Senate buildings, I had already created an affiliated project, Peace Road. It consists of public activism, publicizing the international highway, and it has turned into a global movement for peace. I'll share more about Peace Road later. This is the tunnel. In November 14, 2016, at the construction site of a test tunnel built for Korea-Japan underwater tunnel, Karatsu, Kyushu, Japan. Creating the road to one world. Regarding construction, the biggest challenges are those of crossing the spans of ocean that separate Alaska from Russia and Korea from Japan. The divides between those territories are both physical and spiritual, and the joint commitment to building a road uniting them will represent important steps toward peace for the human race. Of course, it is not an easy task. Since the dawn of human history, there has been no greater engineering and social challenge. Yet, I know that it is possible and that it represents the ultimate task that must be accomplished in our era. The harmonious cooperation of all people and governments, attitudes that persist based on the tormented history between Korea and Japan are a huge obstacle, and they gave rise to opposition to the tunnel. But we have to forget, and set our minds on the positive side, on the positive outcomes. An undersea tunnel connecting Busan in Korea with Karatsu in Japan will boost our respective abilities to contribute to the global economy. The anchor cities of Karatsu and Busan will become hubs for global trade, linking the Eurasian continent to the Pacific region. The tunnel will unite these two nations, cultural assets, both traditional and cutting edge, for global tourism. Most importantly, its construction will plant the roots of peace in Asia, and cooperation between two countries will serve as a model for heaven healing the wounds of conflict and hostility felt in nations and among peoples throughout the world. The reality is, however, that these two nations pursue their own interests. I encourage their leaders to think about England and France, who waged wars against each other for a century, yet joined hands to build the Channel Tunnel that connects them together. If the Korean and Japanese people open their hearts and accomplish genuine forgiveness and reconciliation, we will see the Korea-Japan Peace Tunnel built in our time. This tunnel will not just symbolize, but realize humanity's future based not on fear, but on hope. My husband and I therefore prayed that constructing this tunnel as part of the Peace Highway would create a low-pressure area on the Korean peninsula, into which the high-pressure areas surrounding the peninsula to the east and west would converge to bring unity on the peninsula. Looking at the map with a motherly heart, I feel as if the island and the continent long for each other, and the peninsula is where they meet. The second major challenge for the International Peace Highway is that of crossing the Bering Strait between Russia and the United States. That location will prove to be even more challenging than the Korea Strait. The Bering Strait once represented the ideological divide between the democratic and communist camps as the United States and Russia grappled with each other. Connecting these two nations is a vital step toward global peace and unification. I want everyone to be able to travel the International Peace Highway by car or even bicycle from Cape Town to Santiago, from London to New York. I want taking a trip with your sweetheart through any country around the world to be as easy as visiting your hometown. One end of the highway will be the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, and the other end will be the Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. It will cross the Bering Strait to link the African continent and Eurasia with the Americas. From the perspective of this highway, Korea will be the midpoint. By heaven's grace, the birthplace of the true parents for whom humankind has long awaited will be at the very center. Many people question how we can accomplish such a formidable task. Yet history shows that all great achievements have come amid difficulties. If it is the will of God, there must be a way. We already have engineering prowess to construct a bridge tunnel complex spanning the Bering Strait. Concerning the cost, we need to put it in perspective. Compared to the money that the world is investing in wars that do nothing but destroy nation and people, the cost of a bridge tunnel constructed for the sake of peace is insignificant. Nations and movements sacrifice lives and resources following the logic of power. A foolish and ineffective way to resolve perceived injustice or settle disputes. Our Heavenly Parent is showing us the path of true peace. As the book of Isaiah says, now is the time to beat our swords into plowshares. I have mentioned the Peace Road Project. It consists of events in which people of all ages and nationalities, wearing Peace Road t-shirts and carrying a Peace Road flag, ride bicycles or walk to show their support for our proposed International Peace Highway. Their path ends at the local government centers, where officials and social and religious leaders speak at rallies, publicly announcing their support to the initiative. for the initiative and stimulating publicity in local media. Leaders and citizens of any countries, including members of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, have welcomed the Peace Road movement. In 2015, people in more than 120 countries participated. Altogether, the Peace Riders that year symbolically traversed the world in 93 days. Bold love breaks an iron curtain. With the coming of the year 1990, people were feeling hopeful that the world might truly change. I would hear one person saying the term Cold War will soon no longer be heard, and another responding that maybe your hope. But the Soviet Union is holding on, and communism is gaining power in many countries. Peace cannot be so easily achieved. They would agree on one point, or it won't be easy. In the late 1980s, with the American conservatism on the rise, the Solidarity movement generating success in Poland, and Glasnost and Perestroika progressing in Russia, the world was entering an era of reconciliation, at least on a superficial level. At the same time, most Moscow-directed insurgencies were building momentum in Africa, Asia, and Central America. Moscow had succeeded in forcing the United States to pull out of Vietnam, to run rampant there, and in the killing fields of Cambodia, Marxists were still bent on their ambition to communize the entire world. At that time, my husband and I sponsored the World Media Association PACfinding Tours, taking Western journalists to see firsthand the condition of the Soviet Union and other communist states. Informing journalists with indisputable facts was an effective step toward ending the Cold War. Besides taking the blinders off these journalists' eyes, the tours generated positive relations with Russian media. In addition, we welcomed the teams from communist countries during the 1988 Seoul Olympics, serving them with Korean food and gift. On that foundation, my husband and I decided to go to Moscow to meet President Mikhail Gorbachev. 17 years earlier, in July 1973, we had declared that one day we would march to Moscow. As we fought to overthrow communism, we had envisioned holding a rally in Red Square, and in October that year, we announced this to our members. Most were enthusiastic, though the prophecy reminded some of the dreamlike vision of Don Quixote, Sunburst. One of our church bands turned our vision into a song, Red Square, with the immortal refrain, "Must go to Moscow." Although the accomplishment of that goal took longer than we wished, my husband and I never forgot our commitment. We believed that winning the Soviet leadership's heart in Moscow's Kremlin Palace would tip the scale toward liberating God and all of humankind. Our victory over communism work over the years was ultimately not about a political system, nor was it a public relations strategy to gain support from anti-communists. At its root was and is the question of God or no God. The real purpose of our struggle is to liberate the communist world and the West as well from atheistic materialism. During the Cold War, most people in the free world, including the journalists on our PACfinding tours, had no idea what life was like under communism. Others in a position to know choose to turn a blind eye, hesitating to take action out of fear. In the meantime, hundreds of millions in the communist world endured dire circumstances, some not knowing where their next day food would come from. To save these suffering millions, our Heavenly Parent pushed my husband and me to win over the Soviet Union and open the path by which we could do so. Engaging the leadership of the Soviet Union was certainly no simple task. President Gorbachev had been implementing gradual reform, but he had to deal with an entrenched bureaucracy programmed to maintain a belligerent posture as the leading nation of the communist world. Hidden behind an iron curtain, the Soviet Union projected the image of a powerful, iron-fisted empire. A few days before we departed for Moscow, my husband and I sat down to discuss our plan with senior members of the Unification Church. Some of them tried to dissuade us, arguing that it was too dangerous for us, as notable opponents of communism, to walk into the communist stronghold. No one could derail my husband's and my determinations. However, nonetheless, my husband, recognizing the seriousness of the matter, was considering the future as he looked onto the face of each and everyone there. He said something unexpected. "It's time to decide who will lead the movement when I am not here." All voices were silenced. Again, he looked at the church leader, one by one, and then spoke with care and gravity. "Even if I am not here, it is fine as long as Mother is present." His statement conferred on me the serious position of co-founder of the Unification Church. Everyone was surprised of what Father Moon was saying, but I just listened quietly, having accepted the mission of God's only begotten daughter and Mother of Peace for 30 years. I had done my utmost to help my husband at the forefront of God's providence to save and guide the world. Now he had made it clear that heaven's authority is equal with father and mother, husband and wife. It seemed he was making the announcement at that moment in case anything unfortunate happened in Moscow. Later, Father Moon decided to share the same message with thousands of New York area members who had gathered to honor the 1990 Parents' Day with us. In this keynote address, he set into the public record that which he had stated to our leadership. There in the New Yorker hotel, he declared, even when I am alone, I represent true parents. And the same goes for true mother. When she is alone, she represents true parents. Now there is nothing to worry about. Fundamentally, I am the first founder of the church and Mother is the second founder. Until today, women have followed men, but from now on, they are on a horizontally equal footing. This was not a one-time statement from my husband. At a meeting on June 15, 1991, True Father proclaimed his Gomyong at Clearstone Deer Park Lodge in Canada. In the presence of representative Japanese women leaders, the Gomyong is a final decree a king leaves for his subjects before passing away. In this proclamation, my husband declared that after his ascension, I would continue our God-given mission and that the Japanese women leaders should take responsibility to support me. In November 27, 1994, at Belvedere Training Center in New York, Father Moon again announced my public mission as the movement's second founder. At that time, the educational program for 160,000 Japanese women and significant events in certain nations had concluded, so my role was expanding. On that day, I resolved in front of members, let's all pledge to become the family that will unite and establish the tradition of true parents. In April 1990, a few days after that Parents' Day celebration, my husband and I, with our eldest son Eugene, arrived in Moscow. The venue was the 11th World Media Conference and the first Summit Council for World Peace, sponsored by the World Media Association and the Association for the Unity of Latin America. During the conference, President Mikhail Gorbachev invited the participating world leaders to the Kremlin Palace. I was the only woman included in the invitation on the invitation list and was treated very graciously. My husband and I awarded President Gorbachev the Grand Cross Medal for Freedom and Unification, AULA. We held President Gorbachev's hand and offered a simple benediction. God bless you, Mr. President. Of course, it was obviously unacceptable under the communist regime to pray for God's blessing in the office of the President of the Soviet Union, the epicenter of the ideology-driven atheist state. Nonetheless, President Gorbachev was warm with us and struck a friendly tone in our chat after the prayer. "Mrs. Hak Jahan Moon," he remarked, "I do like your traditional Korean dress. It looks beautiful on you." April 11, 1990, Father and Mother Moon and President Mikhail Gorbachev. I answered with a smile. "The First Lady, Raisa, always looks beautiful too. Women all over the world respect her. I'm looking forward to the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Gorbachev tomorrow at the Little Angels performance. My husband told me you are a handsome man, and I can see it's true." Through our conversation, the atmosphere became friendly. President Gorbachev's smile was truly warm and bright. I had the impression that we all were flying on the clouds. I thought, this is the power of prayer and the hand of God. As the meeting went on, my husband did not hesitate to advise President Gorbachev, "The success of the Soviet Union depends on whether you put God at the center or not," he said, and he was emphatic. "Atheism will lead to nothing but self-destruction and disaster." Father Moon told President Gorbachev that the only way for the Soviet Union to survive was for Russia to continue his economic and political reforms and to allow freedom of religion. President Gorbachev's face showed he was well aware of the enormity of Father Moon's advice, yet he could not help but receive what he said. Never before had anyone said anything like that in the Kremlin. Looking back, I feel confident to say that the words we exchanged at that moment changed the history of the world. I truly felt that heaven and earth were listening to every word with bated breath. I truly felt that heaven and earth were listening to every word with bated breath. I will end there and come back the next day. Thank you so much.